Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? My name is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and welcome back. So today I'm going to be piggybacking a little bit. I'm bandwagoning, so to speak, because I am definitely picking up a conversation that was started a little bit earlier from a couple of other videos from some really awesome YouTubers and good friends of mine. And it's a conversation I think is important and I have some opinions on and wanted to continue talking about. So what we're doing is discussing the idea of port begging for other third-party multi-platform games to show up specifically on the Nintendo Switch, which is a trend and an idea that a lot of us have seen pretty much since before the Switch even launched, and definitely since, with a couple of key third-party titles that a lot of us feel should probably already have been coming to the Switch, yet we haven't seen that. There's been a few instances of some companies, developers, and publishers even telling people to ask for it, to post on social media, to be active and vocal and say, hey, you need to tell us and get excited with hashtags that you want these games, so then maybe we'll throw you a bone and be kind and decide to just dangle this game above your heads and then maybe give it to you. It's a pretty interesting scenario, and not one that many people are a big fan of. Now, for myself, part of the reason I'm deciding to make this video, like I said, has to do with a couple of other videos that some other people made earlier today. For me, it started first thing this morning as I was getting ready for work when I watched my main man, Ms. T's video discussing basically this exact topic. And then, of course, later in the day, Player Essence, OJ, almost said Francis. Oh my gosh, he hasn't gone by Francis in forever. OJ at Player Essence also made a video discussing the same thing. And both of them made a video very specifically focused on Bandai Namco and the Project Cars 2 thing that I'm going to be getting into in a minute. But the point is, they both made really excellent videos, pretty much discussing what's going on with companies feeling like they can now demand the consumer and the Nintendo fan beg online for these companies, and specifically Bandai Namco in this case, to bring their games over to the platform people want it on, which is completely ludicrous. So I will definitely say please also go and check out those two videos by T and OJ as well. I'm going to try to remember to link those below. All big parts of this conversation, and now I do want to touch on it and, like I said, share my 2 cents on it, because I do think that this is fairly important. It's not a huge deal at this point, but I think it's important, and I just have feelings and opinions on it, and that's what I like to do here. So again, port begging. That's the basic concept that we're getting at here. And that phrase, port begging, is something that personally, I only really saw crop up in this last year, pretty much in 2017, with the advent and introduction of the Nintendo Switch. And the fact that we were still seeing a lot of third-party companies have a lot of trepidation and play a little bit hands-off and wait and see. We're still seeing some of that, although obviously for the most part it's going away. And we've started to notice, hey, some third-party companies aren't giving us the multiplats that we were hoping we were going to see with Nintendo's new console coming off of the Wii U. We wanted to see this improved, and we weren't seeing it. And then with all of these other games that started to look like great fits on the Nintendo Switch, everyone was saying, hey, where are these games? And then we got to this whole scenario where a lot of people were basically port begging. And then after that, we started to see examples of companies, most specifically with Bandai Namco, who sort of by default is the company that we're really talking about here. We started to see companies like them start to basically come out and say, hey, you need to start asking us for some of these games. And a lot of us saw this happen first with Dragon Ball FighterZ and a couple of other things. Recently, I mean, within the last day, all of a sudden it's come out that they've also basically said to do the same thing with Project Cars 2. Project Cars 2 is the thing that really started this firestorm, and I have to say, after learning the details, researching the quotes, listening to Mizati and OJ's videos about what's going on and their opinions as well, I have to agree that this is a pretty gross situation. Again, kind of more specifically on the Project Cars 2 thing, which then of course starts to build into the whole bigger idea of port begging. Let's get into quickly the quote with Project Cars 2 from a Bandai Namco representative and kind of discuss what that's all saying. So this quote comes from Bandai Namco's community manager, Cyrus Wesson, and he said, quote, I can't speak to a potential Switch version just because I don't have that information. What I can say is that if people really, really do want a Switch version, I know the Switch is extremely popular right now, let us know on our social channels on Bandai Namco Entertainment, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, let us know everywhere, and we will definitely let the devs know that's an ask. And the devs are extremely, extremely receptive to everything that's going on social media and everything their fans say. So you can also just let them know on the Project Cars website that they will definitely receive that information. So there you go. That's kind of the quote that puts everything in perspective with what's happening with Bandai Namco, the company that first basically started asking people to port bag with Dragon Ball FighterZ and is now doing the same thing with Project Cars. And the real problem here is Project Cars has a freaking history with the Nintendo audience and with Nintendo consoles, because Project Cars, the first game, was going to release on the Wii U, and they made all sorts of promises, and they kept talking it up behind the scenes, saying it's got all the dynamic weather and graphics and everything that you want. It's going to be a great showcase for the then brand new Wii U. And it got a lot of people excited. And then, of course, it turned out that either none of that was true or they changed their minds and then continued to lie about it. The game ended up going from a Wii U and PC exclusive to PC, Xbox One, and PS4. Wii U version never saw the light of day. We never saw a screenshot or video as far as I know. And that game launched, and the Wii U fans were left in the dust. So that, in and of itself, felt very gross and deceptive. None of us liked it. I was never even that excited about the game, but I remember sort of covering it in the early days of Rule of Two Review. This is like circa 2014 or 13 or so. And I was like, man, like, I don't really care a whole lot about this Project Cars game, but what the heck is going on? And here's what made it even worse, especially, again, when you combine this with them asking for us to port bag for Project Cars 2. What made it even worse is that that game was funded by Nintendo fans to bring that game to the Wii U. It literally was a crowd-funded game, the first Project Cars, to come to the PC and Wii U. So it was PC and Nintendo fans that gave the company Slightly Mad Studios, the actual developer, not Bandai Namco, the publisher, but Slightly Mad Studios, the developer, the money to even bring this game into existence. And then it straight up just kicked the Nintendo fan and the Wii U in the ass and walked away. Now, I can look at some of the realistic properties of this whole thing and say, okay, it was obviously an ambitious game, and apparently was what they were trying to do. Sure, I'm sure that it was difficult to make that game run properly on the Wii U. I don't necessarily deny that, because we can all look at the facts of how powerful the Wii U was and what that game on the competing platforms was able to do. Sure, there was a difference. But that doesn't mean that it was handled properly, and it doesn't mean that they still shouldn't have worked hard to give the fans that gave them money the game that they were actually buying. So needless to say, coupling that with the Project Cars 2 request, it's like, get the hell out of here, guys. Like, I don't really understand what they're thinking that they can ask all the Nintendo fans out there to just beg online, fall to their knees and say, please bring us this Project Cars 2 game. I mean, these guys already, whether it was their initial design or not, they basically stabbed the Nintendo fan and the Nintendo audience in the back at that time. And so they really haven't deserved any sort of possible respect, and they haven't deserved for any fans to even desire to have their apparently pretty average game released on the Switch. Now, I'm not really sitting here trying to sling mud. You guys know me. That's not really my thing. I have to admit how gross this whole thing is and how much I don't really like how it's playing out specifically with Project Cars 2. But I don't really want to sit here and just completely slam them. I mean, Bandai Namco does publish and develop some of the greatest games, and that's kind of where the situation gets even stickier, because they've also worked with Nintendo. They worked with Nintendo. They were blessed with the ability to work on a Super Smash Bros. Game. And that is like a legendary thing to be able to say. You don't just get to work on something as monumental as a Smash Brothers game. And that game performed very well. It sold very well. It was developed incredibly. I mean, they did a great job working with Nintendo on this game, and they do deserve credit for that, absolutely. So there's a history there, which makes it kind of strange that they've been so weird with the Project Cars thing, and even with Dragon Ball FighterZ and the Nintendo fam. But then we come to the biggest thing of all, and that is that the Switch right now doesn't need anyone to port bag. The Switch is an absolute smash. It is selling better than anyone expected. It obviously is outpacing Nintendo's expectations. It's surprising retailers. It's surprising Nintendo fans. It's obviously surprising developers, because we're seeing other developers, smart developers, developers who care and understand what's going on, start to jump on board. We're getting games from Rockstar and Bethesda, and heck, even EA and 2K. We don't need to port bag from companies that should otherwise be absolutely, obviously bringing some of their games to the Switch. Dragon Ball FighterZ shouldn't even be a question from Bandai Namco. And Project Cars 2 probably shouldn't even be a question. If they're interested in it and they sit here and they acknowledge through this quote that the Switch is a big hit, and they basically are saying, we know fans want this game or would otherwise want this game on the console, they should just do it because the market is obviously there. The Switch is selling too fast to even keep in stock, and almost every single game releasing on the Switch is selling extremely well because people want to play these games on their portable Switch and also have the ability to put it on the TV. So the numbers and the demand and the desire is there from a business sense, and the fact that they look at it from this perspective of you should port beg is just completely ridiculous. And it's why just the very concept of quote-unquote port begging just doesn't make sense for the Nintendo Switch anymore. When the conversation first started and people were joking about it and talking about it back in like March, April, and May when the Switch was brand new and no one really knew how it was all going to continue to play out at that time, I can understand it a little bit to a small degree, where it's like, hey, a lot of third parties haven't seen success on Nintendo platforms in a very long time, so it's risky for us to want to bring this next big game over to the Nintendo console that we're not sure how much money it would cost us to port over. So if we see verbally online that people really are wanting these games, maybe it lets us know that the numbers are there. Nowadays, that excuse to me truly doesn't hold water because the numbers are obviously there. Everyone can see them plain as day. Just take a look at the sales and the demand and everything that's happening there. And again, companies like Bethesda and Rockstar are really exposing this more than ever now because they've already shown that they're willing to jump on board with extremely ambitious and in many cases hardcore, quote-unquote hardcore M-rated games are coming to the Switch. And you better believe that these games are going to sell extremely well and leave companies, not so much companies, but leave certain games, like a Project Cars 2, in the dust, literally, because these games are going to do well and show that the market was there and that these companies understood it, whereas these other companies didn't. Now, regarding the quote, I wish I didn't wait so long in the video to get to this, but regarding the quote, I do have to say that the simple way this was worded, even though it kind of started some of this small little firestorm that a couple of us are talking about, and some of us are very heated, understandably, about, this quote isn't like, it's not the worst quote. It's not like it was worded in a way that actually straight up sounds offensive. He wasn't really being rude. He said it very matter-of-factly, and I think that it's worth taking note of that. It's not like he's really trying to just stick it to the Nintendo fan. But it does still speak to the larger problem, which at this point, I think I've exhausted the topic, and we all pretty much understand where I stand and just what's going on with this whole thing. At the end of the day, I think that we're just beyond the port begging days, and there's another video on a similar topic about how the Switch is maybe beyond some of the things that have been holding it back initially that I'm going to make in another day or so as well. But at this point, the way this is being handled by Bandai Namco isn't really a great thing, and I can't say that I love it. And it takes a lot to even get me to this point. I mean, I don't really get mad or heated very often, and this isn't really heated, quote unquote, but it definitely got a rise out of me. I just have to say that I'm not a fan of what this all says. So I don't know, man. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think that this isn't even really a big deal and worth having conversations about? Or do you think that this is kind of a problem and maybe the way it's being handled currently from this company, especially surrounding this one game, isn't really the best, like myself and even some of the other fellow YouTubers I mentioned have been stating? I definitely want to hear what you guys think about it. And that's pretty much it today. So thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.